Moscow, seen from the Sparrow Hills. Stalin-era skyscrapers masterminded to make the architectural foundation of a totalitarian state's capital. The countless golden domes of Orthodox churches. Here's another Moscow, a third Rome as it was called in ancient Russia. The view is being changed, forever. You could hardly name a modern city that's developing its landscape faster. Dozens of new buildings have appeared in Moscow over the last 3 years. Unique and ambitious, some of them are considered to be in bad taste. Others a significant breakthrough in architectural design. Many old-timers hardly survive. Some of them are hidden behind giant advertising hoardings. Some, surprisingly, are decked in bright modern colours. And some just can't live through the never-ending changes. A small, calm world in the centre of Moscow. It seems time stopped here years ago. Alexander is an architect and Moscow historian. He showed us what he calls the real Moscow. For him, this old yard may be the last place where that unique, out-of-time spirit remains.
This place is alive. In modern Moscow yards, you won't see children playing, people drying linen on the line. Advertisements for new houses proclaim they're prestigious and convenient, but the word coziness disappears from use.
Nowadays, this spirit has almost disappeared. Alexander leads us to the Trubnaya Square 100 metres away. 4 parkways once crossed each other here, making a beautiful view. Now it's a huge construction site with vast banners on ugly-looking safety fences. Whole blocks of buildings built before the revolution were demolished, and they exist now only as fake facades.
They call it reconstruction by changing the materials. They plan to rebuild the buildings to look the same. But the heart of the place, the Boulevard's crossing, will disappear with a new shopping centre built here.
Even this miniature Moscow, standing at the Russian Architectural Museum, hasn't caught up with the changes. These are the famous, iconic Soviet hotels Moskva and Intourist. The unique Stalinist building pictured on each bottle of Stolichная vodka and simple modernistic tower no longer exist. In reality, a new building in classical style will soon appear on a site where Intourist stood. Giant banners cover the empty space where the Moskva hotel stood. Its future is unclear. It could be a park square here, or, oddly, a building that looks the same as that considered a symbol of Stalinist architectural design. David Sarkisyan, head of the Architectural Museum, considers this replacement of historical buildings a modern Moscow tragedy.
You just can't replace a wooden house with a concrete one in the same shape. It's stupid. You may say that concrete is a stronger material, but let's call things what they are, the replacement of an original with a fake.
Rapid development has created some irrational looks and architectural combinations. The hectic building process creates a unique style, which could be described, actually, as the absence of any style. Eclectic is the key word. It's a mix of genres and cultures between 2 continents. Moscow puts pretty Western European buildings in the wild Asian puzzle. Kursky railway station, a living monument to an industrial trend, hides nowadays behind a modern retail centre. An elegant 19th century villa stands by its side. This house, by Mikhail Belov, could stand in ancient Pompeii, but its rich and elegant architecture seeks to harmonise with the traditional style of a 17th century Orthodox church. Symbols of different cultures, Roman and Orthodox, overlap in the camera's viewfinder to create a thrilling variety. This modern business centre building stands wall to wall with old houses of the 19th century. It's not an optical illusion as you may think. This building really has a curved wall, and that's why architects jokingly call it a pregnant house. Moscow State University is seen distorted in the glass surfaces of a newly built library. It's a modern construction, trying to keep the lines of the main tower, and yet shiny bronze Lomonosov, founder of the venerable House of Learning, sits in front of the library, watching his old and greenish twin standing across the road. Mikhail Filippov is reputed to be the foremost classicist in Russian architectural circles. However, like most of his colleagues, he refuses to call himself a follower of a definite style. "I just do the things I like," he says. A so-called Roman house in central Moscow is his biggest project, a large residential building reflecting characteristics of the architecture of antiquity.
The main point of classical architecture is a system of columns. It's an aesthetic stability, a strict shape like the shape of the human body. It cannot have a so-called modern interpretation. To keep classics alive, you should find new, clear ways, but always follow the never-changing canon.
The unique modern feature of this building is the rounded shape of the courtyard. From above, the composition of the apartment complex looked like a perfect circle. Its creator says this style is not popular in modern Moscow. An architectural code of honour urges all members of this community not to criticise each other, so Filippov talks about the current state of affairs without mentioning any names. He talks about styles.
Nowadays, classical architecture is almost gone. Modernism rules the construction site. What is called classical today is indeed an ugly kitsch style called the modern interpretation of classical. Modernism is not an architectural style itself, it's a design of objects, monumental design, anything but architecture.
The architect of this modern apartment block at Moscow's Ostozhenka district, Yuri Grigoryan, doesn't agree with that point of view.
Every piece of architecture is modern. Greek architecture, for example, was modern for that period. We have to build houses that will keep their actuality and represent our times so they can stay close to the buildings of older centuries and look not worse, even better.
Мне кажется, задача архитекторов — это искать такой архитектурный язык, который бы не старел.
From the rear, a house built by Grigoryan looks like a factory. Decorative pipes and sheets of steel are prominent. But from the facade, this building has a very modest and even noble look. Grigoryan says the trick is in the stone. It looks better growing older. The apartment building and neighbouring offices are forming a modern Moscow ensemble.
Modern times are unique. We can build almost anything. There's nothing impossible for modern architects. It's strange to make clones of buildings of the past. It's a violation of the creative abilities of modern people.
Vladimir Plotkin, one of the most experienced of the modern architects, tries to make apartment houses a part of the environment. This is one of his largest works, an elite townhouse complex on the outskirts of the city. Geographically, it's on the outskirts, but these buildings have an absolutely different mood. A minimum of concrete and metal, a maximum of glass and light. People living in such apartments should feel like living in the country, while having all the advantages of being a citizen of the metropolis.
The closer a man is to the ground, the more humane is a housing system. Talking about style, this system is monochrome and its silhouette follows the principles of Soviet constructivism, developed in the 20s and 30s of the last century.
Here's a fresh and shining example of a modern triumph of imagination. The Moscow House of Music, one of the most ambitious recent projects with strong official government backing. Construction of the 10-storey music complex with a 2-level basement and total area of more than 40,000 square metres took only 18 months. The glass dome, with a stage placed inside, is the most noticeable, but not the largest part of the ensemble. Architects Yuri Gnedovsky and Vladilen Krasilnikov created the whole complex, featuring the highest hotel in Moscow, the luxurious 29-storey Red Hills. Here we again meet an eclectic combination, a business centre neighbouring a temple of the arts. Such a symbiosis represents the reality of modern Moscow very well. But Gnedovsky has a creative explanation.
The composition is similar to a traditional Russian monastery complex. Here's the wall, and here's another wall near the river. And these two main buildings, look, it's a cathedral and a bell tower.
The House of Music hosts symphony orchestras and opera concerts, so the hall should have brilliant acoustics. But when the building was finished, the acoustics were far from ideal. It was fuel for critical irony. The hall was initially designed without an organ, which appeared in the project later. It was the largest organ in Europe, so when the ceiling was redesigned, the sound problems appeared. The symphony hall is never empty. Orchestras are in almost permanent rehearsal. In a few hours, the giant room will be filled with people enjoying the music, but just now, Gnedovsky is telling us about the architecture.
Архитектура современная.
Modern architecture is a mix of different tendencies in which we can see many trends. We tried to keep the unique spirit of good old Moscow traditions. For example, the color of the chairs is the same as in the Moscow Conservatory. These reminiscences are very important in modern architecture.
Design can't be separated from content. We wanted to create a great Philharmonic hall. For over a century, no one did this in Moscow.
A large dormitory community on the outskirts of Moscow, Mariano. Tens of thousands of people live here. In daylight, the district is deserted, its residents travelling to offices in central Moscow to return in the evening. It's a good place to travel through time, to see the changes that have happened in construction in the past 15 years. Dark and gloomy multi-storey buildings installed chaotically are reminiscent of the 90s. Low investment, low quality, poor town planning. A symbol of those times, ugly metal shells in the courtyards serving as a shelter for cars. 10 years on, futuristic towers placed in strict order, broad modern roads with complicated junctions, a land of hypermarkets and multiplex cinemas. In modern Russia, economic growth led to the creation of giant construction companies capable of building a skyscraper in record time. Money defines style. Not every client cares about design. The words largest and tallest help to make a business plan. The Triumph complex in northern Moscow looks like a Soviet skyscraper on steroids. Almost the same shape, almost the same detail, but bigger, taller, and more expensive. There are lots of rumours about the quality of construction of these buildings, but that's another story. Constructivism is the main theme of a new building for the National Centre for Contemporary Arts. The story behind this building is an example of how art can change reality. The revolutionary, Bolshevik look of the house is a result of fighting different obstacles.
It began from bureaucratic misunderstanding. The federal government gave money for capital repairs. No one knows why. It was an old factory and there was no need for capital repair. But this state of affairs urged us to keep the dimensions and style of the building. So we deconstructed this house and then reassembled it in a new way.
Reassembled bricks create an original design for the walls. They say the bricks from the demolished Moskva hotel were used here. Metal constructions, giving an impression the building was turned inside out, are fully functional. They're forcing the walls. But the most interesting aspect is the underground floor. Here's a model of the building showing its further development. Here's the house we've just seen. And here is the 22-story tower with large, dangerously protruding blocks. It's definitely a constructivist dream. Such a project can't be realised on federal money, so an investment scheme will be used. Most of the floor space will be offices, luxurious apartments and restaurants. But the administration of the Contemporary Arts Centre is ready for this sacrifice. Investment means quick realisation. This ambitious project should be completed by the end of this decade, or never. The tower was designed by Mikhail Hazanov, head of the architectural bureau which created the Contemporary Arts Centre. Hazanov has developed one of the most ambitious and crazy, as he calls it, projects in modern Moscow. A provocative artificial skiing centre designed specifically for boring industrial district Nagornaya.
For the money that's spent on construction in Moscow, we have a desperately small number of super interesting projects that will become new city sites. I suppose the reason is in the conservatism of minds. Bureaucracy tries to standardize fresh ideas.
Hazanov believes that in Russia there's little chance to make a crazy idea work, but he's certainly someone who does just that. Among others, he's working on the Moscow City project, the largest and most ambitious construction initiative in the Russian capital's history. If there's a place to fulfill crazy ideas, it's definitely here. A giant business district rises on a large, deserted square close to the historic heart of Moscow. It's a Russian Manhattan, a complex of skyscrapers for businesses, luxurious hotels and elite apartments. International investment is estimated at billions of dollars, bringing foreign construction companies and architects to work here. Sergei Chobin, a Russian-born architect from Germany, works on Federation Tower, Europe's tallest building soaring 355 meters.
It is a very important place in the town. You can look at this place from the river, from Hotel Ukraine and from White House. The very important idea and decision of us was to make the right silhouette of this building, because all of big buildings in Moscow have very clear silhouette. It's not something as a square, but it's every time some vertical silhouette.
The history of the city project begins in 1992. Here's the first proposal for the district, hanging on the wall in the workshop of Gennady Sirota, chief architect of the complex. He tells us about the long haul from the sketch to site construction.
The whole process was stalled after 9/11. It's a very important mark. We have to change our projects, make additional tests for emergency situations. A lot of work we're still doing.
But in the last couple of years, real results have been seen. Skyscrapers are sprouting like mushrooms after the rain.
We're building one floor a week. These results can be achieved only with the most up-to-date gear. Construction of other buildings also goes very fast. The whole complex is expected to be finished by 2008.
Despite the enormous size of the construction, the critics are silent. The place where the city is being built has no architectural, historical or ecological value. For centuries it was just a piece of land. Then garages and small factories stood here. But it doesn't mean that the city will be divided from the rest of Moscow. A direct high-speed railroad will lead to the international airport Sheremetyevo. A special line of the Moscow Metro and a brand new internal rapid transportation system will make it easy to get here from any point in the Russian capital. The site looks like a giant anthill today, hundreds of construction workers toiling round the clock. It seems the dream of building a city of the future within Moscow is finally coming true.